Welcome to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with
Hello,
big dreams.
my name is Lorraine and I'm absolutely delighted to be here today with Henry Atturo of Provectus Management Consulting. How are you, Henry?
Yeah, I'm great, Lorraine. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's always a pleasure. We've heard you speak several times and I just want to keep picking away at all those gold nuggets that you can share with business owners out there. Now, there are just so many topics that we can talk about with yourself. You've got an absolute wealth of experience. But today we're going to focus on productivity for business leaders today. Now, before we get into that though, Henry, just share a bit of your background with the listeners.
Sure. So I started my working career with Coles Myer. Well, actually, it was actually GJ Coles when I first started. That's how old I am. It was back in the 70s. And eventually it became Coles Myer in 84. And I had the privilege of working right through the ranks, predominantly in Kmart division, and eventually worked my way up to general manager of Kmart in New Zealand. Held many other national roles in Melbourne with the organisation, and then eventually, after 23 years, I and my family returned back to Perth, and I joined a very small company called Red Dot Stores. At the time, I think there was only 8 or 10 stores in the business. That was in 2001, and we grew that business to 60 stores, and I'm sure now is a household name. I'm sure that most of us have been into a Red Dot store, if not us, our children or our elderly parents. And I left Red Dot in 2017 to start my own business, and that's the consulting business I run now.
Well, that's definitely the short form you've had there, Henry. I know you've shared many stories and huge amounts of experience with us, but thank you for that. And I'm sure we'll hear your wealth of experience as we go through the interview. So let's talk about productivity. Right? You've seen it. You're working with business owners. You're working in large companies. You've worked in a management roles. Where do we start? Do we all just think we're productive? How many of us think we're productive as compared to how many are actually productive? Let's start there.
Yeah. I think we're all saying we're busy, we're all saying that we're productive. And I think genuinely we are. But when you actually nut it down and you say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Am I getting, am I really getting the value out of the time I'm investing in tasks and activities? And we don't normally sit down and analyze that, but we should. Because I think a lot of us, and I mean this with the utmost respect, and I put my hand up and say, I'm included in this cohort. At many times we're busy fools, where we're running around in circles, being very, very, very busy. But how productive are we? And that's the challenge. Now, we all understand, productivity levels, but particularly if you're in manufacturing, logistics, we've got all these measures in place for our people, for our staff, for our some of the collateral and tools that we use, some of our equipment. We try and measure everything, but we don't often measure ourselves, or if we do, we measure ourselves as a result of results. We say, we achieved a X% GP and an X% EBITDA, and our sales are up, 15%. So therefore, as a leader, I'm doing really well. That's great. But all those things are outcomes. They're outcomes of activities and tasks that we undertake. As a business leader, whether, if you're a one-man band or a very, very small business with very few staff, how much time are you actually spending on your business? Imagineering, thinking about change, thinking about transformation, thinking about the future, thinking about automation, growth, etc. Now, if you're a one-man band, you're going to be limited to the amount of time you can spend. I mean, take, for example, a landscape gardener who runs his own landscape business or her own landscape business. They're probably spending, 5.5 to 6 days a week on the back end of a shovel. However, having said that, if you're not spending time thinking about your business and how you're going to improve it, they'll always be at the back end of a shovel, and they're just simply trading time for money. And that they're not going to go very far. So they should be spending, probably 15 to 20% of their time on the business. And if that needs to be a Sunday afternoon, then that needs to be a Sunday afternoon. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're a CEO or managing director or general manager, and you're in a mid-tier or large organization, you have several direct reports, well, then you should be spending probably 80% of your time on the business and only 20% of the time in the business. And that time that you spend in the business should be by walking around. And whether it's a service-based industry, whether it's a manufacturing-based industry, it's irrelevant. It's the old-fashioned acronym of MBWA, managed by walking around. Get out there, talk to your staff, go and talk to the people on the floor, the people at the coalface, the ones that interact with your customers, or the ones that are actually providing that service. Go and talk to your customers. That's working in your business as a managing director or as a CEO. The other time, it's actually shooting the breeze. It's actually thinking about, how can I improve my business? How can I make it faster, smarter? How can I better support my people? Because ultimately, all this is happening through people. Yeah. Now, we hear about, mental health. We talk about pressures on staff. We talk about the 5 generations that we're now employing. What are you doing about that? And if you're not thinking about it, if you're not talking about it, if you're not reading about it, the likelihood is you're either not going to do much about it, or you're going to take the first shiny object that someone waves at you and says, oh, this will fix everything. And you implement it and then realize, 2 or 3 months or even a year down the track that it was just another widget. So as a business leader, it's your responsibility to make that organization sustainable and future-proof the business. In order to do that, you need to spend time thinking about the future and planning for it. How do you do that? You have to be disciplined, and you have to have a plan. So I'd love to have a look at people's diaries. What have they got in them? Lots of meetings and lots of activities and lots of board meetings and etc. How much time just to think about the business?
I'm wondering, we should maybe do a live poll after this. How many business owners actually have thinking time in the diary? It seems like a luxury, a luxury item.
Well, it is. I mean, we're so busy, right? So we're all trying to fit some time in the gym. We're all trying to fit some time to meditate. We're all trying to fit some time with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, and then all those, business imposts that are placed on us. And sometimes, we feel this need to go and have coffees and meetings with people. But what are the outcomes of those things? And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you don't, because there is a degree of time you need to spend networking. And that part of that is working on your business. But are those networks and those connections truly beneficial to your business? Are we analyzing those to making sure that if I am going to have a coffee or a business meeting, it's going to be to the benefit for me and my business? And it might not be that person, but it might be someone they know or a connection. And sometimes you don't know this, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, and things. But if we keep on chasing shiny objects down rabbit holes, we're going to be busy fools.
That's an X for productivity then. For all those CEOs and leaders at the minute who are off chasing shiny objects, that's an X on the productivity score, right?
Yeah, well, it can be, yeah, and we need to do part of that, but we also need to do some research into part of that. So, for example, if culture is becoming more and more important, Gen Ys and Gen Ys and Gen Zs are saying to us, we want to work for purpose. We want to work for an organization that has purpose. And as an individual, I want to have purpose within the organization. That's what they're telling us. So how do we address that? What are we doing about it? Who are we talking to about that? So we want to go and chase that rabbit down a hole. Fantastic, right? But if we're just chasing another widget, then where's the value? So I think we need to be a lot more selective.
So where do we start then, and Henry? You've spoken about the 80-20 rule on productivity. I mean, is there is there a scoring system or something that business owners should use with regards to measure different tasks? And, you know, when we're talking about productivity, how do we measure productivity at a task level or a week level? You know, does it does it all come back to the outcome? It's outcome driven. What are you going to achieve that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Outcome driven. I mean, as a CEO, I mean, think about what is your role, or a managing director, or even a general manager. I mean, general manager probably a little bit more hands-on, and so, you know, I talked about the landscaper who's who probably only has 15% of time to spend on the business, but needs to. And I'll talk about the CEO, at a top level organization that probably needs to spend 80% of their time on the business. And there's probably a sliding scale depending on what role you have in the organization. But even as a business manager or unit manager, you need to be spending time thinking about how to improve that part of your organization, whether it's your business unit, whether it's, a department or a faculty or whatever it is. And as I said, sliding scale, it might only be 40% of the time, but you need to do it. So
thinking about how to improve your business and looking at innovation or automation and all these things gets a tick on the productivity.
Sure, absolutely. But it's about prioritizing, right? So you should have you'll have a strategy, no doubt, even though 80% of Australian businesses don't have a business plan. You should have a strategy, and out of that strategy, you should have a business plan. And then each department or each business unit will have their own individual business plan with key objectives and key activities, which is fantastic. So as the leader of the organization, how are you going to facilitate and support those key stakeholders, that leadership group, and how are you going to help them support their key stakeholders, which is indeed their staff on the front line? What improvements can you make? So the information's there. We've got, we measure everything these days, right? So the data's there. And if it's not there, it's relatively easy to measure, providing you're measuring the right things. So if, for example, I'll take a very, very rudimentary example. Let's talk about staff turnover, right? I mean, this is a key issue at the moment because, people are poaching staff left, right, and center. It's only going to get more difficult to get good people, but the hard bit is actually hanging on to them. So what are the motivators? What are the things that are going to keep people in an organization? We talked about purpose, core values, the right vision, the right elements of an organization. Well, spend, the equivalent of 1 to 2 days a week thinking about, researching, talking to people about that. If that's a priority for your business, and I think it should be. We talk about well-being of staff, we talk about mental health, we talk about engagement. Okay, good. That's a subject matter. What are you going to do about it? If that's a priority for your business, go and spend a day or 2 days a week actually researching, talking to the right people, having the right coffees with the right people, and then it's productive. And it may be that after spending, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks doing this on a 1 to 2 day a week, and I'm not suggesting that you may put it away a whole day, but the equivalent thereof, you might come to the realization that you're actually pretty good. But it's okay. But
Who'd have thought it? Yeah.
It validates it, right? It validates it and it goes, great, fantastic. We're going okay. To all the, everyone I've spoken, all the research I've done says that we're actually pretty good. So therefore, I'm not going to stick my head in the sand. I'm going to now park this and review it in 3 or 6 months' time. So you can then put that away and focus on something else, and whatever that is, so automation, an ERP system, because it's all about continuous improvement. And we used to say, I remember back in the 80s, it's all about, you can't stand still. Well, now you can't even walk briskly. You've got to jog at a fast pace, otherwise you're going to get left behind.
That's right. So a couple of things have come out of that, Henry. First of all, you've managed lots of staff, right? And I love that acronym you use. I remembered it since the last time you spoke. It sticks in the head, and it's got so many depths to that one thing, you know, managed by walking around. But so while the business leader, you know, is spending time on, you know, constant improvement, new technologies, you know, innovation. I like to speak to you a little bit about that as well. Innovation. How do you make sure that your staff are productive? Because they might be on the bus with regards to values, you know, or people will tell you they've got the shared values anyway. You'll find out after a wee while. But how do you make sure, you know, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that your team are being productive? Where do you start about measuring that without, you know, having online time tracking and timesheets? Where would we start there?
Yeah, I remember when, I think it was late 90s. Don't quote me now. When Kmart division decided that they put this time in motion in place in store activities. You know, stores where you've got customers actually, you know, trying to interact with you, and you've got, you know, so many factors, so many things that could come into play. And they actually did a whole program, and it took, you know, quite a long time to track how long it would take, you know, for a person to do a price check or for a person to put an item on a shelf. And then they calculated that, and then they used that to do rostering and scheduling. And of course, it was chaos because we're human, right? We're not robots. Now, having said that, you know, I myself in warehouse and logistic operations, you know, did put some measures in place to say, you know, it takes, on an average, it takes X amount of time to process a pallet based on these types of items, et cetera, et cetera. So then you allocate resources to it. So yeah, we do use that stuff, and there are programs out there that help us use that. But, you know, if you're trying to do it to a finite, you know, minute or, you know, 2-minute, you know, it just gets, depending on the type of industry, but when it's a service-based industry, an interactive industry, it becomes more and more challenging. So I think we've got to be careful about what we measure. However, the old adage of managed by walking around, there's another one that says, you know, what gets measured gets managed. What gets measured gets managed. So if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. Yeah. So once you've got your strategy and your business plan and your key objectives, and then your core key activities by department or by job role or by, you know, however your organization's structured, every employee in the organization should have some measures, you know, and they'll be different for different people. So let's run through an example very, very quickly. Right. And let's say one of those objectives is to raise, you know, increase revenue by 8%. You know, we'll call it 20%. Increase revenue by 20%. And, you know, most organizations will have that because they want to grow. Great. Fantastic. So that's the overall, you know, that's the overall key objective, one of the key objectives of the organization. Another objective might be, you know, staff retention at, you know, 92% or better. Or we'll call it 90%, 90% or better employee retention. Fantastic. There's two good measures, right? But I'm the janitor. So that's not relevant to me. I don't go out and make sales. I don't go out and upset staff or hire staff or give them things to do. So how can I impact that? But you can, quite significantly, because even though you might be the cleaner, the level of cleanliness that we have in our washrooms, in our kitchens, in our work areas helps us feel good about where we work. So even though it might, you know, it might not be the main thing, it contributes to that. So once that cleaner understands the impact of their role to the overall key objective of the organization, they're going to be more engaged because they've got skin in the game. They get it. They understand how their contribution impacts. So they have purpose. Equally, you can explain to the cleaner that when the sales guy and the receptionist and all the other staff come to the toilet and it smells really nice and the toilet paper's full and the toilet seat's clean, guess what? They're going to feel good about that, and they're going to go out there with a smile on their face because it wasn't a detractor. So therefore, you're helping the sales guy and the receptionist be in a good mood because they've had a good experience in the area that you're responsible for. You know, fresh fruit in the bowl, the fridge is clean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no, muck in the teacups and what have you. So even though a cleaner's role is really important, because if you've ever worked in an office that hasn't been cleaned well, between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, all you hear is whinging about how the cleaners didn't do their job. So that's got to be a detractor, right?
You're talking
let's
from
take
the
the
voice of
detractors away.
experience there, Henry.
Absolutely. I was the first guy to whinge and go, what's happened? What have the cleaners done? Why haven't they done this? So when you sit down and actually explain people's roles and how it impacts, and if they can make that connection between what they physically do. I mean, you take the receptionist, right? I know that a lot of businesses don't have receptionists, but in essence, everyone's a receptionist every time you answer the phone.
Yep.
But if one of the key is, client retention and client satisfaction and increasing clients, would it make sense to answer the phone as quickly as possible? So let's put a measure on that, right? So let's answer the phone within 3 rings of it ringing, right? Now, most telcos will give you that data because it's readily available and it costs you nothing. Yeah. Right? So if we can say to the organization, one of the tasks that we're going to undertake, one of the measures is we're going to answer the phone within 3 rings. Now, I know I'm being very petty, but I'm just trying to give very, very simple examples of how low you can go. We're going to answer the phone within 3 rings. And what we're going to do, we want to reduce the number of phone transfers. Just hold the line, I'll put you through. And you know what's going to happen, right? You're going to stay on the line. There's going to be no one at the other end. And then the line goes dead. So we want to get rid of that and we want to reduce that number. So whatever the number is now, we want to reduce it by, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%. So let's pick a number and then we measure it. And then we report on it and then we tell everyone. And then when everyone can see how it's coming down, everybody goes, yep. Now, if that's the wrong measure, then, you're just barking down the wrong tree, right? You're going to change different behaviors. So that's just an example of how you can apply metrics to every single role in the organization. But the key is I've got to feel like what I'm doing is adding value and aligned with the business objectives, aligned with the values and all the rest of it. If I can make that connection, then I've got purpose within the organization.
And if you've got purpose, then obviously that's going to have a direct correlation to
satisfaction and productivity.
And profitability.
Well, that goes without saying, right? So if I'm more productive, then I'm going to get the job done faster. So therefore, it's going to take less. Therefore, I've got more capacity. Therefore, I can do more work with less people. Therefore, I'm going to be more profitable.
I'm just going to ask you off a little bit off tangent here. What do you do with the employee who achieves all the targets, but skies off for a day and a half because they've achieved all their targets? So might have a bit of a bad attitude, but is hitting your goals. How do you handle that one, Henry? Just sort of side question.
Yeah, thanks. No pressure and without notice. Look, I think although it's a lot more challenging in large organizations, in larger organizations, because, it's easy to become just a number, right? In smaller organizations, it's possibly easier to manage and you see it more often. I think it's about sitting down with that employee and really understanding what motivates them, and coming to an arrangement that is fair and equitable. Because one of the things that you need to do is you need to be seen to be fair. As a leader, if all of a sudden you've got favorites or you play one person against another, no, that's not an authentic leader. That's not someone who is going to be respected long term. You're going to create angst amongst your team. So what motivates them? Can you put something in place that can equally motivate other staff? So if the incentive is, we achieve all this, everybody gets half a day off, or you get a day off if you achieve it. If that's transparent and that's communicated and understood by the organization, by other people in the organization, then it's really fair and equitable, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's important to realise that it is a conversation about how do we make it work for both parties. It is an agreement, whether it's employee or not. Henry, you mentioned before when I was chatting to you about the importance of planning for productivity. And you've spoken about the 80-20 rule and what leaders should be doing. How do we go about instilling, should employees have daily, weekly and monthly plans of stuff that they have to achieve every day?
Look, I think we've got to be careful that we don't spoon feed, to the nth degree. We want our employees to show initiative. Well, I certainly do. We want employees to be innovative, to use their experience. Now, equally said, a new employee day one, we don't want to, them to show too much initiative because they don't understand the organisation, probably haven't got a grasp on their role, et cetera, et cetera. However, it's all about expectations. It's about setting expectations, and there's different models that you can use. I like to use simple models. The old KISS principle, is alive and well. But really sitting down, and this should be done on a one-to-one, is really sitting down with individuals and saying, this is what the organisation expects of you. As your manager, this is what I expect of you. Your colleagues, this is what they expect of you. Now, don't make this up. You need to do a little bit of research beforehand and actually go and do a staff survey to find out, how do we want to be treated around here? What are our core values? How are we going to work together? And once that's established, you can sit down with a new employee and say, this is what's expected from your manager, your colleagues, from our customers, from the organisation, the royal we, the wider organisation. And this is what's expected. And in turn, this is what you can expect. You can be expected to be paid on time. You can be expected to be treated with respect. You can be expected to work in a safe environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we've established expectations, both yours and mine. The next thing is, it's my role as your direct manager to provide information, tools, and education for you to do your job. Now, there'll be an inherent level of skill or knowledge that you will have, otherwise you wouldn't have got hired in the first place. And that will be at different levels depending on the role you're playing and depending on the organisation. But based on those facts, what am I going to do to support you so that you can meet those expectations? So once the expectations have been accepted and agreed and understood, right? Understood. Sometimes they're not. Then the next step is giving them the tools to actually be able to do it. And some of those tools is actually just giving them the right information at the right time, and making sure they've got a computer that works, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Once we've done that, we establish some agreed KPIs and say, okay, so now that you understand what's expected of you, this is what I need you to achieve in this fashion. How do you feel about that? Yeah, good, great, excellent, good, away you go. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold you accountable by putting some regular times where we're going to catch up and we're going to track how you're going. And that's just feedback. So as a manager, part of your role is to manage your people, not just to get on task. But what we do, we sometimes expect our people to know what they're supposed to be doing, by osmosis almost. And then we go head down, bum up, right? Because I'm busy, I've got things to do. Well, maybe if you spent more time on your people could be doing what you're currently doing, and then you're doing the higher level stuff. Does that?
Yeah, I'm laughing there because I can relate.
We're all guilty of it, Lorraine. We're all guilty of it. But if we actually stop and think about it, we'll take steps to do it. But what we do, we don't stop because we're too busy.
That's right. So we need to plan thinking time. We need to hold employees and ourselves accountable to some level of outcome, to keep us motivated and productive hopefully they go hand in hand. Where does innovation fit in amongst productivity?
If I can share a little story, a short story, I'll try and make it as short as I can. One of the things that I was really passionate about is understanding the mood. Now you can do staff surveys and you can do, metric things and measures, and you're an I, you're an S, you're a W, whatever. But really getting the feel of the people on the coal front. So what I used to do, one of the things I did was go around to stores after closing time. So I'd send out an invitation open to all staff, casual, full-time, part-time, whatever. It'd usually be a Monday or a Tuesday night. I tried to make sure that it wasn't a night that interfered with major sports and whatever. And I'd just invite the staff to meet with me for pizza and pop with Henry, right? So that was the motto, if you like, right? Share a pizza and pop, as in fizzy pop, with Henry, right? So and to be fair, 95 to 100% of the staff would show up. People that weren't on shift would actually come in, right? It was an hour. We'd sit down in a circle out the back, with all the boxes and all the rest of it. We'd have a couple of Domino pizzas and a couple of soft drinks, and I just ask them how long they've worked there, why do they like working there, what don't they like about working there, what their interests were, what are they currently doing, and you get things like, and so how long have you been working here? I've been working here 3 years. And so what do you do when you don't work here? You're obviously a casual. Yeah, I'm a casual. What do you do when you're here? Oh, I'm studying forensics at UWA. And you go, whoa, we've actually got rocket scientists working here,
Yeah.
And the amount of knowledge, and then someone will say, oh, I didn't know you studied forensics, in the same store, that have been working with each other, because obviously they're not in the same shift or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I didn't know you had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and all of a sudden it just opens up and people become more personable. But I got to learn a hell of a lot, about what motivated them, why they wanted to work with us, what they didn't like. And so that allowed me then to put things in place. And you find out that you've actually got a hell of a lot more experience in the business than you actually think. And when you ask them to come up with ideas, they've actually got the grunt and the know-how to work it out for themselves. And I did this systematically, right, around the stores. And another one is giving them the challenge to actually come up with a solution, rather than you imposing the solution upon them, right? How do you lift? Here's a classic one. I'm going to talk retail because that's, it comes easy for me, but we can talk anything. I want to increase. If you said to a person, I want you to increase sales by 15%, straight away, the eyes start to roll back and go, oh my God, how much is 15%? But don't worry about 15%. If you actually said, the average customer that comes through your till, whether it's a Coles or Woolworths, it doesn't matter, spends X amount of dollars. And let's call it $15. What I want you to do, I want you to increase that average to $15.50. So that's 50 cents for every customer that comes through. Do you think you could do that? Yeah, I think so. I want you to come up with ideas of how you might do that. Next minute, you should have seen it. The amount of ideas that come up, and they will just do it. And you'd walk into a store and you're saying, so what, how? Well, I grabbed this item over here that was sitting in the back of the store. I've put it on the counter, and guess what? Every third customer's buying one, and that's $1 each. So actually, I'm getting a better than my average, or whatever it was, So it's amazing. The answers are there. They know all you need to do is give them, challenge them and give them some parameters and some scope to actually go and do it. Rather than impose.
Brilliant. If you just enable and provide a space, your team have got the ideas. It's interesting. I was just listening to another presentation yesterday, and it was around customer service. And he also shared that one of the big hotels he'd been in had won the best customer service for years. And because the one reason that they shared on how they managed to do that was, we let the staff make all the decisions. doesn't matter what it costs. They know the answers. You just need to ask, and as you say, provide that space. So interesting, because often business owners think, leaders, it's their job to be innovative. They have to come up with all the ideas. They have to come up with the plan and the solutions and show how great they are.
No, quite the opposite. Your job is to enable, right? But that MBWA, that managed by walking around, provides you with that opportunity.
Okay.
Right? So, competitor comes to town, right? Everybody panics, batten down the hatches. We're going to cut costs. We're going to do this. And you know what? To some degree, you need to do that because there's a curiosity factor, there's an innovative factor, new person on the block. People are going to gravitate to that. But after a while, it stops, right? They either choose one or the other. Okay, and they might flow from one to the other from time to time, but it sort of balances itself out. But what you don't want to do is lose 50% of your market share to that competitor, or 40%. So allow that initial wave to take place, right? Do what you can to mitigate, but it's the afterwards, because the customer that may have changed, but if you can draw them back, they're going to be more loyal than they were before they left, right? The staff have the answers of what to do and how to go about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they're there, they're in the coalface, they're hearing it, they're living it. So listen to them.
I think, Henry, that you have shared so many nuggets with us today. I didn't get to touch on a good few points that I wanted to ask you about. I'm going to have to interview you again. But look, you've just shared so much wisdom. And if there's one thing that people could take away, I love that, managed by walking around. I think you've talked about productivity, you've talked about delegation, insights, innovation, allowing you to step back, enable the staff so that you can work on the innovation and the thinking time and the creativity, which these are just gold, especially for newer business owners who have got to go through all these, make all the mistakes themselves.
Yeah,
by listening to stuff like this, you're preventing a lot of business owners from making these core mistakes themselves. So, Henry, have you got anything else that you would just like to add?
Yeah, look, I know it's hard. It's easy for me to sit back, 40 years on, and you know what? I think I've made probably 10 times more mistakes than most business owners and senior managers. But I think that's the benefit, because you've made those mistakes, and then you've learned from them. You've had some wins when you've changed your mindset, and that's why you can speak about them so easily. But quite frankly, if anyone wants to give me a call and just have a chat, there's no obligation. Happy to help if I can.
Thank you very much, Henry. And I'll, contest that. You're very generous with your time, very generous with your information, and you've got an absolute wealth of experience and mistakes, shall we say, under your belt. Henry, thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Pleasure's all mine, Lorraine. All the best.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.